Judges chapter 4. We're going to look together, God willing, at the story of Deborah and Barak and Jael. What more appropriate text to look at on Mother's Day? When Ehud was dead, the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord sold them into the hand of Jael, king of Canaan, who reigned at Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who dwelt in Harosheth Hagoyim. And the children of Israel cried out to the Lord, for Jael had 900 chariots of iron, and for 20 years he had harshly oppressed the children of Israel. Now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at that time. And she would sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the mountains of Ephraim. And the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. Then she sent and called for Barak, the son of Abinoam, from Kedesh and Naphtali, and said to him, Has not the Lord God of Israel commanded, Go and deploy troops at Mount Tabor? Take with you 10,000 men of the sons of Naphtali and the sons of Zebulun, and against you I will deploy Sisera, the commander of Jael's army, with his chariots and his multitude at the river Kishon, and I will deliver him into your hand. And Barak said to her, If you will go with me, then I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. So she said, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, there will be no glory for you in the journey you are taking, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Then Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. And Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh. He went up with 10,000 men under his command, and Deborah went up with him. Now Heber the Kenite of the children of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, had separated himself from the Kenites, and pitched his tent near the terebinth tree at Zanaim, which is beside Kadesh. And they reported to Sisera that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. So Sisera gathered together all his chariots, 900 chariots of iron, and all the people who were with him, from Harosheth Hagoyim to the river Kishon. Then Deborah said to Barak, Up, for this is the day in which the Lord has delivered Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone out before you? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. And the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army with the edge of the sword before Barak. And Sisera alighted from his chariot and fled away on foot. But Barak pursued the chariots of the army as far as Harosheth Hagoyim, and all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword. Not a man was left. However, Sisera had fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between Jabin, king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. And Jael went out to meet Sisera, and said to him, Turn aside, my lords, turn aside to me, do not fear. And when he had turned aside with her into the tent, she covered him with a blanket. Then he said to her, Please, give me a little water to drink, for I'm thirsty. So she opened a jug of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him. And he said to her, Stand at the door of the tent, and if any man comes and inquires of you and says, Is there any man here? You shall say, No. Then Jael, Heber's wife, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand, and went softly to him, and drove the peg into his temple, and it went down into the ground, for he was fast asleep and weary. So he died. And then as Barak pursued Sisera, Jael came out to meet him and said, Come, I will show you the man whom you seek. And when he went into her tent, there lay Sisera, dead, with the peg in his temple. So on that day God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, in the presence of the children of Israel. And the hand of the children of Israel grew stronger and stronger against Jabin, king of Canaan, until they had destroyed Jabin, king of Canaan. Then Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, sang on that day, saying, When leaders lead in Israel, when the peoples willingly offer themselves, bless the Lord. Hear, O kings, give ear, O princes. I, even I, will sing to the Lord. I will sing praise to the Lord God of Israel. Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the field of Edom, the earth trembled and the heavens poured. The clouds also gushed water. The mountains gushed before the Lord. This is Sinai before the Lord God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were deserted, and the travelers walked along the byways. Village life ceased. It ceased in Israel, until I, Deborah, arose a mother in Israel. They chose new gods. Then there was war in the gates. Not a shield or spear was seen among 40,000 in Israel. My heart is with the rulers of Israel, who offered themselves willingly with the people. Bless the Lord. Speak, you who ride on white donkeys, who sit in judges' attire, and who walk along the road, far from the noise of the archers, among the watering places. There they shall recount the righteous acts of the Lord, the righteous acts for his villagers in Israel. Then the people of the Lord shall go down to the gates. Awake, awake, O Deborah, awake, awake, sing a song. Arise, Barak, and lead your captives away, O son of Abinoam. Then the survivors came down, the people against the nobles. The Lord came down for me against the mighty. From Ephraim were those whose roots were in Amalek. After you, Benjamin, with your peoples. From Machir, rulers came down, and from Zebulun, those who bear the recruiter's staff. And the princes of Issachar were with Deborah. As Issachar, so was Barak, sent into the valley under his command. Among the divisions of Reuben, there were great resolves of heart. Why did you sit among the sheepfolds to hear the piping for the flocks? But the divisions of Reuben have great searchings of heart. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan. Why did Dan remain on ships? Asher continued at the seashore and stayed by his inlets. Zebulun is a people who jeopardize their lives to the point of death. Naphtali also on the heights of the battlefield. The kings came and fought. Then the kings of Canaan fought in Shinnach by the waters of Megiddo. They took no spoils of silver. They fought from the heavens. The stars of their courses fought against Sisera. The torrent of Kishon swept them away. The ancient torrent, the torrent of Kishon. Oh, my soul, march on in strength. Then the horses' hoofs pounded, the galloping of his steeds. Curse Meroz, said the angel of the Lord. Curse its inhabitants bitterly, because they did not come to the help of the Lord, against the mighty. Most blessed among women is Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Blessed is she among women in tents. He asked for water, she gave milk. She brought out cream in a lordly bowl. She stretched her hand to the tent peg, her right hand to the workman's hammer. She pounded Sisera. She pierced his head. She split and struck through his temple. At her feet he sank. He fell. He lay still. At her feet he sank. He fell. Where he sank, there he fell, dead. The mother of Sisera looked through the window and cried out to the lattice, "Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why tarries the clatter of his chariots?" Her wisest ladies answered her. Yes, she answered herself. Aren't they finding and dividing the spoil? To every man a womb or two. For Sisera, plunder of dyed garments. Plunder of garments embroidered and dyed. 2 pieces of dyed embroidery for the neck of the looter. Thus let all your enemies perish, O Lord. But let those who love him be like the sun when it comes out in full strength. So the land had rest for 40 years. Please pray with me. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your word. It's living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword, fit to cut us up, make us ready as sacrifices for you, O Lord. We thank you for the opportunity to come together to hear your word. We pray that you would help us to walk away from here today understanding your word better, emboldened to obey you better, strengthened for the work that you have for us, not the work that is often flashy, Lord, but particularly the normal, the everyday, the work that goes on behind closed doors. We thank you, O Lord, for mothers. We thank you for mothers in Israel. We pray that this would be a particular source of encouragement and strength to them today. In Jesus' name, amen. What a story, huh? And what a poem after it. As for why I picked this story to talk on, well, I'm preaching through the Judges with folks that I teach in Jael, and we were almost to this point, so I figured, why not just go for it? This will at least help me to really, really think about this story, because it's a story that takes some thinking. It's a story that, like most of the stories in Judges, you read them and then you might walk away kind of scratching your head a little bit and saying, what am I supposed to learn from this? What am I supposed to get out of this? Do I approve the actions here? Do I disapprove? Thankfully, with this one, we have a little bit of help, because we have a psalm written right afterwards that gives us a theological interpretation of the story, and it's probably different than we might think right off the bat. This is one of those stories, like so many in the Bible, where you might not read all the details, or you might not point out all the details to your kids in Sunday school, because there's some gory ones. There's some details here that are very suggestive here. This is part of the book of Judges during the time of the Judges. So just to set the scene, let me give a real brief, dirty overview. First 5 books, right? We have the books of Moses. God calls Moses at the time of the Exodus to lead his people out of Egypt, where they had been enslaved because of their own sin, and lead them to the promised land. Unfortunately, Israel didn't want to go. They were scared. They did not trust God enough. They were too scared to go into the promised land because they had giants and other such things. So they wandered around in the wilderness for 40 years until their kids took up the baton and went in under the leadership of Joshua. When they go into Canaan, this is one of those things, if we don't have a sense of the big picture, it's kind of, once again, it's kind of tough for us to apply. Because they go in, and God says, go into Canaan and wipe them out, drive them out. And if we look at that by itself, we say, genocide? And what do we do with this? Well, no. What did God do in Egypt? He judged them and their gods. God judged them and their gods. And Canaan, when you look at passages like Leviticus 18, they were pretty much like Egypt. So what God does with Israel is he says, okay, did you see what I did to Egypt? I want you as my son, Israel. I want you to grow up, and I want you to go and act like me. I've made the judgment here. These people are wicked. Go in and drive them out. And don't leave any of them in there with you, because if you do, then you will fall into the trap of following after them. Instead of being a light to the nations, you'll go after those nations. Well, in the book of Joshua, we see they make a good start, but they don't finish the job. There are still nations left. There are still areas left for Israel to conquer. And then the first chapter of Judges, we see it goes rapidly downhill after Joshua dies. When Joshua dies, the people who led along with Joshua, what's going on there? Why are they failing? Well, they're failing because they're not passing on the faith to their children, and they don't trust God anymore, and so they go after foreign gods. God sends a judge. God sends outside opposition to come in and judge them, and then they go, "Oh no, this was a bad idea." And they cry out to God, and He sends a judge, a Yasha, a deliverer. So the meat of the bulk of this book is about the exciting stories is how God saves His people over and over and over. It's endless variations on the same thing. How does God save His people when they don't deserve it? When they have gotten themselves into trouble by running away from Him? So that's how this section starts. Israel is once again, they've fallen into great sin. They've fallen after other gods, and so God sends Jabin, the king of Canaan, to oppress them. And He sends his right-hand man, Sisera. This ought to have wounded the Israelites, because you look back in Joshua, they've already beaten a Jabin. Jabin is like a title, like Pharaoh, king of Egypt. They've already beaten Jabin. They already burned Hazor to the ground in their initial conquest. And now, because of their apostasy, it has It has resurged. It has grown back to threaten Israel. In the first chapter of Judges, we see the reason that Judah was the most successful tribe at accomplishing what God sent them to do. They led Israel. But the reason that they didn't finish their task was because of their lack of faith in God to deal with chariots. Right? Chariots in this time, chariots were like the tanks of the ancient world, right? You think of the boldest that it would take for an infantryman today to go up mano a mano versus a tank. Well, that's pretty much what ancient infantrymen would have felt when they see chariots coming at them. They would be terrified. And here Jamin's got 900 chariots. 20 years, they're harshly oppressed. This is the longest oppression yet in the book of Judges. And then we see God send a judge. But this judge is not like the others. Deborah, a prophetess, like Miriam, like Huldah, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at that time. Deborah is a very interesting character. She's one that some folks really, really like to use for their own ends. Right? We live in a culture, we live in a day where we like to erase all distinctions. We want to say men and women, there's no difference, and there ought to be zero difference in how we interact with one another. There ought to be no offices reserved for men in the church. Look, Deborah, prophetess. Right? Others who want to hold the line on what Paul gives us in the epistles and say, well, God tells us the leaders of the church ought to be men. What do we do with this text? Well, I think if we pay close attention to the text, we see what to do with it. This is an extraordinary circumstance. This is during the time of the Judges. In Isaiah, I believe it's chapter 3. I don't have my references down on a piece of paper because we were up last night very, very late. That's my excuse. Let's stick to it. But in Isaiah, we see one of the judgments that God says, he says, or one of the ways that the evidence of God's judgment is on the land of Israel. He says, you are ruled by women and children. Israel, there's no men left. There's no men left who are sufficient for the task of ruling you. And so we see this as an evidence of God's judgment. But we want to be careful to distinguish between an evidence of God's judgment and act of sin. All right? Deborah is portrayed throughout this. She is portrayed as sinless in this circumstance. There are no sins that are pointed to in this text that Deborah commits, as far as I can tell. That's my best reading of the text. So, what do we do with that? Well, very odd. I can relate because I'm a jail chaplain, and my very office is evidence of God's judgment. And yet, I pray that I am used as part of God's blessing within his judgment. Deborah, as a woman leading Israel, because there's no men there to accomplish that task sufficiently, is evidence of God's judgment on Israel. And yet she is a great blessing on Israel. And she is a mother in Israel, as we'll see portrayed throughout this text. What do mothers do? What do godly mothers do? All the way back, Genesis chapter 3. In Genesis chapter 3, we see that right after Adam and Eve, they sin, they eat the fruit. And then God gives his judgment, and he says there's going to be enmity, hatred between the serpent and the woman, between his seed and her seed. And that enmity is going to last until the seed of the serpent is going to crush, going to wound his heel, and the seed of the woman is going to crush his head. That motif runs all throughout the book of Judges. Okay? Sister's head is crushed by a woman. Abimelech in chapter 9, his head is crushed by a millstone dropped by a woman off of a wall. The crushing of the head of the serpent and the the attack of the seed of the serpent against the seed of the woman. That motif is all through the Old Testament, but it's particularly prevalent in this book. Deborah is a mother. What do mothers do? They raise up children. They raise up children to be the next generation to love the Lord, their God, with all their heart, mind, and strength. They raise up children to, God willing, their goal in raising them up is to see them exceed themselves. That is the goal of a mother. Deborah does this. But as often happens, it doesn't work out quite like she wants it. It doesn't work out perfectly for her. She is a mother in Israel. She judges here, and then she calls for Barak, the son of Abinoam, and she gives him the word of the Lord. Barak. Now Barak, son of Abinoam, he's from Kadesh. Kadesh means sanctuary, so he's likely a Levite. He's a Levite, and she says to this Levite, by the way, another big theme in the book of Judges is the failure of the Levites to teach the people to do their job. They were the ones who were supposed to be leading the people and following the Lord. They were the ones who were supposed to teach the people all the things of the Lord. So she calls this Levite, this son of Israel, to do his job. She says, go, raise an army from Zebulun and Naphtali, and go and fight Sisera. I'm going to raise up Sisera. God's going to raise up Sisera and send them against you. Go over here to Mount Tabor, take with you 10,000 men, and there's going to be a multitude against them. Barak says, if you go, I won't go if you won't go, basically. If you go with me, I'll go. I won't go if you won't. We know Barak was not craven, because he does lead the people here in battle, but he lacks faith here. He's not willing to go without her. He's like a son who's not willing. I can relate. He's like a son who's not willing to go into a hard situation without knowing that his mom's got his back. That reminds me of me in high school. Way too much for comfort. So she says, okay, I'm going to go. Now, this is sin. This is lack of faith. But knowing how it's handled, this is not handled by, okay, you are now disqualified. You are done. No, God works in the middle of the mess. God works in the middle of the muddle, and God still uses Barak. He's still the best Israel's got. He's still the best Israel's got to offer, even though he is not fully trusting in the Lord. Just like Gideon later on, Gideon is terrified. He's at the center of the book of Judges. He's terrified to go and accomplish this work, and so God graciously, patiently works with him by saying, okay, all right, I'll give you the sign. I'll give you the sign, and even then, I'm going to have you sneak into the enemy's camp, and then I'm going to let you hear, like, the enemy tell you what's about to happen from one of their dreams. God's gracious. He deals with us graciously. But Barak does get a minor judgment. He's not going to be the one who gets the honor, no. He's going to be shamed moderately. Not as bad as Jabin is, but he's going to be, or Sisera is, but he's going to be shamed. And a woman's going to get the glory that ought to be his on the battlefield. The glory of young men is their strength, all right? But we know this instinctively. Even though we hate it in our culture, we kind of know this instinctively, right? Like when little boys are there in kindergarten or in elementary school, when a girl can beat them up, they know instinctively this shouldn't be, you know. And then they hit puberty and they start shooting up, and they're flexing, you know. They're showing off for the ladies, right? They're finally coming into their strength. And this is the way it's supposed to be here. All right, check out me open this pickle jar here. So she said, I'll surely go with you. They go. Barak calls Zebulun and Naphtali. By the way, this is happening in the area of what will later be Galilee of the Gentiles, right? So Zebulun and Naphtali are prominent here. Galilee of the Gentiles is referred to in Isaiah 6, Matthew chapter 4, Galilee of the Gentiles, where light's going to burst forth to those who knew only darkness before. And then we have a little interlude here in verse 11. Heber the Kenite. There's no way I'm going to get through chapter 5 here, but we'll hit the highlights. Heber the Kenite is he is separated from his group of people, the Kenites, who were actually joined to Israel. So Heber the Kenite is walking away from Israel. He's walking away from Israel, and he's joining himself with a peace treaty to the enemy of Israel. So Jael's husband is running away from God, just like Elimelech will later on in the book of Ruth. Jael's husband is running away from God and his people, which will obviously be important later on. So then Sisera gets word. He gets word, and the Israelites, they are assembling, and they have made themselves nice and vulnerable. They are right there for the picking. They're up there on Mount Tabor. You bring those chariots that way, you're going to get them all. You're going to get all of them. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Up, for this is the day in which the Lord has delivered Sisera into your hand. Has not the Lord gone out before you?" So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men. And they win. Against all odds, they win. The infantry completely rout this force of multitudes with 900 chariots. We don't know, we're not told the details here. We get the details in the song in chapter 5. What happened? Well, the Canaanites. The Canaanites, they worship Baal, the storm god, the god of the lightnings, the one who rules the thunder, the one who gives them fertility and crops. Actually, it's God. It's Yahweh who rules the thunder. It's Yahweh who rules the rain. And we see in chapter 5, Yahweh sends a storm, just like he sent a storm to Sinai, where Israel was petrified and terrified and shaking in their boots when they heard the Lord speak. Well, Yahweh's storm came again. And suddenly, what seemed like an unstoppable force with a huge array of formidable weaponry, suddenly their weaponry was turned into liabilities. Suddenly their chariots were turned into liabilities. And the lightly armed and mobile Israelites gained the upper hand very quickly. So the army's destroyed, but Sisera escapes. Barak and his men, they wipe out the army, but the leader escapes. The head of the snake has not yet been crushed. And he comes into the tent of Jael. Now, remember, there's a treaty between Heber and Jael. Sisera comes into what he thinks is a safe place. But just like Rahab before her, Jael does not follow her leaders into sin. Right? There's a principle that we see at work with Rahab, that we see at work with the midwives in Eden, that we see here with Jael, that we see later on with Abigail. Just because you have leaders over you whom you are responsible to follow, that does not mean that we are responsible to obey them when they command us, when they enjoin on us to join them in their sin. And so Jael deceptively offers him comfort and hospitality, and then she drives a tent spike through his head. This theme we see throughout the book of Judges. The weapons of war that Israel doesn't have, they're defeated by tools. They're defeated by tools that are used for building up a people. Shamgar, the one-verse judge that's mentioned in chapter 5 and chapter 3, he goes around with an ox goad and he slays 600 Philistines. Later on, the millstone drops on Abimelech's head. Samson slays people with a donkey's jawbone. The weapons of war are not necessary for our God. If you're looking for a text for West Point or military tactics, the only lesson you're going to get out of this is trust in the Lord, not in chariots or princes. Trust in the Lord. You're not going to get how to most efficiently divide your forces to envelop the enemy. You're going to get crazy stories that tell you that all make the same point. Trust in the Lord not in your strength. Trust in the Lord, not in your numbers. Trust in the Lord, not in your princes. So God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan. The last few minutes here, I want to just hit some of the highlights of the poem that is sung. This poem can be divided up into three main stanzas. The first is, what's the situation? Then the battle, and then the aftermath. What's the situation when Deborah comes? Well, the situation is bad. Deborah, she's judging as a contemporary with Shamgar. Shamgar mentioned in Judges chapter 3, verse 31. The judges didn't rule over all of Israel. The judges, and they didn't all, this book is not all chronological. Many of the judges rule concurrently. In fact, the last 5 chapters of the book are actually probably best situated alongside the prologue in the beginning in terms of setting up the circumstances for the rest of the book. The failure of the Levites led to the failure of the people through the rest of the book. But Shamgar and Jael are ruling at the same time, and it's getting bad. It's so bad because of Israel's sin and the oppression that God has allowed them. They can't even go and do ordinary things. They can't go out on the highways. They can't engage in normal commerce. They're oppressed. They've got to sneak around as an oppressed and conquered people. But then she says, hey, remember that same God who came to Sinai and Israel was so terrified? Well, he's still the one who's keeping covenant with Israel today. That's that same God who doesn't forget his covenants is still working with his people who so easily do forget to keep his covenants. She cries out, and this is a glorious song about God's deeds, and it's a song that's supposed to be sung by all the people remembering God's specific, sometimes brutal, and gory detailed deeds. Not only that, but she says, hero kings, give hero princes. Who's she talking to? Israel doesn't have any kings. Israel doesn't have any princes. She's crying out to the nations. She's saying, look at our God. Look at what he has done. And tremble. This is just like Psalm 2. Kiss the Son, kings, rulers, judges of the earth. Look at what's happening and get wisdom here. Don't continue to oppose this King of kings and Lord of lords. So times are bad. Verse 7, until Deborah arose. God, we see often, we're coming towards the season of Pentecost in the church. Very often the Spirit moves, and very often the Spirit is, while we refer to him as with each person of the Trinity by masculine scriptures, the Spirit often works in a feminine way. It sometimes moves. Well, we know from Jesus, the Spirit moves, and you can't always see it. You can understand the Spirit been there by its effects. And so we have a surprise. Deborah arose a mother in Israel. Later on, there's the mother of Sisera is brought up. Deborah is one of 2 women in all of sacred scripture, as far as I can tell, that rule the nation of Israel. She's the only one that rules the nation of Israel as the highest leader in the land at the time, who does so by the approval of God. The other woman is Athaliah, the queen of Israel. And I think it's instructive just to think about these 2 women and compare them. What is different about Deborah as a mother in Israel that Athaliah, that wicked queen, doesn't have? Everything, all right? But let's look at a few things, all right? So Deborah, what does she do? Deborah is raised up because there's no godly men to take that office. And so God shows, you know what? I have a way I generally do things. I'm not bound here. I can raise up this woman to do my will. But what does she do? She's a mother. She raises sons. And she calls on her son, do what you're supposed to do. You're a man now, son. go and play the man. Go and act the part of the deliverer of Israel. In every other story of the Judges, you have the judge, and first the judge comes and yashas. He delivers the people, and then he settles down to judge. Othniel's kind of fuzzy, but he kind of does both of them once. But you have Gideon, you got Samson, you got all these other guys. They deliver, and then they judge. But here, Deborah comes and judges, and then she says, son, be the deliverer. Do what you're supposed to do. Go and rescue my people Israel. Deborah's not clinging to power. Deborah is not saying, oh, finally, now, after centuries of oppression by men, now women finally have the seat at the table, and we're never letting go. Deborah is not a modern feminist. She's not. She's a mother, and that's infinitely more powerful. What's Athaliah? Athaliah is the anti-mother. Athaliah, when her son, the king, dies, she murders every possible heir she can get her hands on. She kills her children and tries to hang on to her own goals, plans, dreams, until she is finally brought down by the one son who escaped, by the one priest who remained faithful and led Israel to throw off the yoke of that wicked, tyrannical woman. Deborah, like mothers are supposed to be, she is not trying to build up her own kingdom. She's trying to build up her household and the household of God. And because of that, we sing her praises today, or we should. We ought to sing her praises today. She is an example for mothers. She's an example for women in times of difficulty. She's an example to look to and say, well, how does God act? Well, God still saves. God still saves. What can the righteous do when the foundations are destroyed? Well, we can get to work and start rebuilding them. Sisera's mother is also another useful foil for looking at Deborah. Sisera's mother, what does she do at the end? Oh, she's wondering, where is my little boy? Where's my little man? And she and her maids, they console one another. Say, well, we know what's going on. They won, and they're just taking their time, dividing the spoil. To every man a womb or two. There's definitely something going on there. Israel has been oppressed, which we know when cultures are oppressed, that's very often the weakest that suffer the most, particularly women and children. When you don't have godly men around, women and children are going to be the ones who suffer the most. Okay, and so they're just carrying on in that vein. They're assuming that the rape and plunder is going on just as they planned. For Sisera, plunder of dyed garments, plunder of garments embroidered and dyed. What she doesn't know is Sisera's garments are dyed, but with his blood and not with others. Sisera's mother, why is Sisera the way he is? Well, in good part, because of his mother. Why is Barak and these other Israelite men, why are they the way they are? Well, because of their mother. Another encouragement. We live in a day where families are fractured and are wounded. Deborah, we don't know anything about her husband other than she had one. We don't know anything about Jael's husband other than he was running away from the Lord, and Jael had to turn back around. And Barak's not her boy. He is her son in a sense, but he wasn't the son who she raised at her feet. He's another woman's son that she calls to go and do the work of a true son. So, when the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? Mothers, love your sons. and love the sons of God's people and encourage them. Encourage the sons of your body to do the work of the Lord, and encourage the sons of God's people to do the work of the Lord, because God works through the mess, and God will use his faithful men and women as they both obey him, doing what he's called them to do. He will accomplish his work. It is still true that a woman is saved through childbearing, and so are we all through the seed of the woman, Jesus Christ. Thank you all. God bless you.
Thank you very much. I was wondering how I was going to get around others when you started. But it is also a reminder for those of you who have been in the adult study school class of biblical theology. Christ is in Judges. It's sometimes hard to see, but God and his deliverance and Christ and types of Christ and antitypes are there. You just have to have eyes to see them. Thank you. Very instructive.